There were some funny moments in there as well, and I've learned that there's a specific way here that a woman is supposed to get onto a donkey to go and fetch water. And me and my friend, we went with a nomadic lady to go get water, and we absolutely failed at getting on the donkey in the right way, and just had everybody around us laughing, and they were kind of falling over just laughing at us.
Hi guys, welcome back to Raw Mission. As you listen to the various guests that we interview, you'll notice quite a contrast. Sometimes you'll meet Muslims who have amazing stories of coming to Christ through dreams and visions, or gospel workers who've been imprisoned or expelled from the countries they've grown to love. But you'll also hear some very ordinary stories of folks who are plugging away, learning language, starting in new places, sowing seeds, willing to watch and wait and trust God's timing. And so today I have a guest who's been living in the eastern Sahara region of Africa for just a few months. She tells her story of how God is calling her into long-term work, initially to support a family who've been serving there for many years. Into the desert, into the unknown, into obscurity, into a form of quiet monasticism, Lena is learning to serve and sacrifice, to die to self, following her Lord's teachings and example. Well, hi, Lena. It's so good to have you back on the show. It's been a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years, I think, since we had you on when you were a student. But it's great to have you back now as, someone living and working overseas.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Matt. And yeah, it's probably been 3 years, I think, and a lot has happened in that time. But it's great to be back on the podcast.
Brilliant. On that particular episode that we did, you were on with a couple of other students, so we didn't hear much of your backstory. So let's start with, where did you grow up and what kind of family did you grow up in? A large family, a believing family? Tell us that story.
Yeah, so I grew up in England, kind of near the Cotswolds region, near Oxford, and grew up in a church-going family. Both my parents were very involved and committed to our local church. I have 2 siblings, and we're all very close. My mum's from Germany, so we have a lot of family over there who we're very close with, and they're believers. My British side of the family are mostly not walking with the Lord, and we're less close with them. But yeah, I grew up in a very stable and close-knit family environment in a beautiful part of the UK.
Great. And I know you've got one brother.
Yes, you've met him. Yeah, I have an older brother, and then I also have a younger sister who's at university at the moment. And it's great to get to do life with them. They're friends as well as siblings now, which is beautiful.
Good. And we first came across each other when you were a student in South Wales at university there. Give us a reminder, in a sense, of what you were studying and how you got an interest either there or before that time in global mission.
Yeah, I went to a university in Wales. I studied agriculture, specialising in animal science, and very much went to university not with global missions on my mind, but with a heart of wanting to serve the Lord wherever he led me. And very quickly, within the first few days of arriving at university, got plugged in with a group focused on global missions. And quite quickly after that, the Lord led me on a journey of really considering and weighing up the cost of going overseas long term. And then within the first few months, I was seriously considering and pursuing that as what I wanted to do with my life.
What were some of the key markers in those early months? There was a Globe Cafe, wasn't there? I think you did a Momentum Yes course. Any other key moments that just really struck you and thought, this is for me?
Yeah, I think the Momentum Yes course for me was key. Often, I think growing up in the church, you're not exposed to some of the statistics about global mission, and unreached people groups isn't a phrase that was thrown around in my upbringing. And just kind of being faced with the reality of how much need there was, especially in the Muslim world, and how few people were willing to go to places where others weren't going, really struck me and convicted me and captivated my heart, I think. And the Lord used that greatly. I had a key friend who was good at challenging me to not just settle for acknowledging the need, but challenged me to really step in and be one of those people answering that call. So she was a great blessing and a key vessel that the Lord used. And yes, the Globe Cafe at the university, the Lord led me into actually being part of that ministry, which is definitely not something I would have seen myself doing. It was very out of my comfort zone. But being exposed to different cultures and people from different backgrounds and just seeing the beauty in the diversity of God's creation and God's people and people made in his image, I think really gave me a heart for that diversity of all the nations and that desire to see every tribe, tongue, and nation gathered on that final day. So that was definitely a key part. And I think often lots of the moments that I look back on and I see as significant were very, very small, almost like mundane moments. I remember a key moment of just walking from my university campus back to my house, listening to some music, kind of worship music focused on the nations, and just really remember walking down this hill. I can picture the spot. And the lyrics went, "If you say go, how can I stay?" And I can remember that moment of sensing the Lord speaking to me through that and being aware that, yes, he's calling people and yeah, how can I stay in all that I can see and in all that I know of who God is? How can I stay? So that's a key moment. Lots of small moments like that, I think, added up to just a very strong conviction that this is a very worthwhile path to follow and way to walk with the Lord.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Yeah, there are key choices in our lives, aren't there? Crossroads we come to where we say, yes, I'm willing to pursue that, or no, I can't. Yeah, that's special. Yeah, I know the role of your key friend there quite well. If I remember rightly, also, you came across South Koreans and others from Southeast Asia in the Globe Cafe. Did you come across many Muslims at university, or was it only when you went off on a short-term mission trip that you came across Muslims personally?
Yes, I did. We had quite a connection to the Malaysian society in my university. And that's probably the place I really first connected with Muslims and built friendships with them and went to some of their events, celebrated Eid with them. And that really captured my heart. And that led me to going to Southeast Asia and going to Malaysia on a short-term trip.
What impact did Malaysia have on you then?
I mean, that was my first short-term trip visiting teams with Frontiers. And it really impacted me, actually. I look back, we were in Malaysia and then we were also in South Thailand, and getting to meet the teams there, getting to see the culture. I fell in love with the culture, to be honest, just the food and the vibrancy and the warmth of the people. And I remember just asking the Lord to give me a piece of his heart for that culture, and really saw him answer that prayer. And seeing the love of the people that had gone there to serve the Lord and the teams there, their love for the people, their love for the place, their hunger and desire to see God's kingdom come there, even if there was no fruit at that time. Some of the teams we'd met had been overseas for decades and had seen very little fruit, but they were just so sure that that was where the Lord wanted them. And they had this faith that I found so inspiring. And they just had so much wisdom, and I was greatly impacted and inspired by them. And even now I look back and there are conversations I had with them that are very deeply rooted now, that have taught me a lot and that I go back to in different situations.
So was that during your university time, the end of your first year, end of your second year? And did you do another short-term trip before ending up where you are now?
Yes, that was at the end of my second year. And actually, maybe quite uniquely, throughout my university years, I ended up going on a short-term trip every summer. So I've been on 4, and now here I am kind of launching out for the long term. I look back and each of them had different lessons and different things that the Lord taught me and showed me, but very much pieced together. I think the Lord taught me a lot in a very short space of time through those. And I think blessed me greatly by getting to meet and be poured into by workers and people that have served for decades. And I think it's quite rare to have really intentional time with so many different people in different parts of the Muslim world. So I feel very blessed and grateful for how the Lord worked that together.
To talk us through the other short-term trips that you had, were they all amazing experiences? Were there any tough times? And also, how did that work into your own discernment process of going somewhere?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think partly because throughout my journey with the Lord of considering overseas mission, I've never sensed the Lord really give me a certain part of the Muslim world or a certain people group. Have very much been open and have prayed that the Lord would give me a place or a people, and have seen that he's led me in different ways. But yeah, I spent some time in the Balkan region, and that was a really great time of meeting a team that taught me a lot about using prayer and spiritual gifts as a ministry tool, and was really blessed and influenced by spending time with them and really seeing how prayer was the kind of center point of all that they did. And they had a prayer center where people on the team would come. Most days there would be someone there spending time in prayer and worship. And they saw that as a way of fueling all other ministry that they did, is having that intentional time connecting with the Lord, which definitely taught me a lot and inspired me. That also taught me quite a lot about team dynamics overseas. It was quite a hard trip in terms of just some of the team dynamics, whether that was with the people I was on the trip with or some of the people that we were visiting. I think it helped me learn that there are different personalities and some team structures are maybe easier to join, and there's some wisdom in thinking through the people that you're going to be doing ministry with and the people on the team that you're joining. So I think it taught me quite a lot about that. And then I also did a short-term trip to the Caucasus region, and that was great. I think when I went on that trip, I was considering that part of the Muslim world for long-term potentially, and definitely went on that trip with a very specific set of expectations, and very much saw those expectations not be met, and came away with some disappointments and some things I had to work through with the Lord, which taught me a lot about myself, I think, and just you often don't realize you have expectations of something until they go unmet or until they're not. Yeah, something clashes there. But yeah, I learned a lot on that trip as well, just seeing some amazing ministry going on. We were in the mountains of one country, and there was a team whose ministry was to drive out to these really remote villages where kind of no one had been, and they would just go and they'd pray, and they were almost ticking them off just to want to cover each of these villages in prayer. So we got to join them on one of those and go to this village and meet some of the locals who had never seen people like us and kind of were a bit always scared at first. We were kind of praying to meet a person of peace, and we ended up meeting someone who was a lot more open, and someone on the team we were visiting ended up getting to pray with him and give him some scriptures, and that was just a really amazing opportunity to get to be a part of that and see how different teams are really using such a variety of ministry tools in order to reach people and just make connections and build relationships. And there's no one size fits all. It's very much the Lord leads in so many different ways depending on your personality and your giftings and the place where you are. I think all of these trips have given me such a bigger view of God, and it's broken a lot of boxes that I think I've put God in, and broken some boxes of what I pictured overseas mission to be like. And actually there's so many different ways that it can play out and look like and be fruitful.
Yeah, can you give us some examples of some preconceived ideas you might have had that were challenged in the different locations you went to? Because, yeah, certainly Malaysia is very different to the Balkans or to the Caucasus. And again, we'll find out where you are now in a minute.
Yes, maybe one of the preconceptions I had was just the idea that to be overseas is long-term, and doing mission is to always be talking about Jesus, and that's all you ever do, and like that's the only reason you build relationships with people is to talk about Jesus. And I think I was just quite humbled in being reminded that no, wherever we are in the world, wherever the Lord leads us, we're there to love people and want to befriend them and love them and do life with them. And obviously the greatest way we can love them is to introduce them to the one that has saved us, and to want them to find that fullness of life that we found or that we've been invited into. But I think that very narrow-minded preconception I had of we've got work to do, and actually it was quite an unloving mindset to have. So I think the Lord's broken that down and reminded me that we do life wherever we are. It's not just go, go, go and always talking about Jesus. I mean, language learning, that's definitely been something I've had to learn. It's just the first few years, realistically, you're having to learn language, and it can, you're realistically not going to be doing anything fruitful, if you want to use that word, because you're learning language and you're kind of like a baby in this new culture where you don't understand how things work and you don't know how to do things yourself. And that just is so contrary to the very productivity driven mindset, and something I just don't think I realized until being in that moment. Having, like, in Thailand, we had a crash course in language. We had like a 2 hours intensive language lesson, and then we were thrown out into this like food market, and we were just told, like, go get some food with like no help. Like, we're not going to help you, just you have to go and do it. And Thai is a tonal language, and it went so badly wrong. And I think I had a bit of a meltdown, but it was just a good reminder to, yeah, those small things that you don't think about as maybe a part of going overseas for mission is those day-to-day life things that are going to be really hard to start with.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because even listening to the podcast, you could get the wrong impression that it's either all amazing conversations about Jesus or praying for people or maybe even dangerous and difficult things happening. But actually, 90% of global mission is just mundane. You're just learning language, you're going to work, you're shopping. It's very normal, actually, isn't it? A lot of it. That's good. That's a good reminder. And that can be humbling. It's humbling if we go in thinking, oh, I'm going to be doing amazing stuff every day. Then it's a bit humbling, perhaps disappointing. But I hope it's also freeing as well and releasing, because it also means if you can be a very ordinary person doing ordinary things in an ordinary job in this part of the world, then you probably can do that in Malaysia, in the Caucasus, in Africa. So it's actually quite releasing too that you don't have to be constantly on some spiritual high or constantly evangelizing. Actually, yeah, we live our normal lives and we're loving Jesus and we're loving others around us. And he'll use that. And we're on a team. Yes, we are purposeful and we're intentional, but it's not all on steroids.
Yeah, 100%. He uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And I think that's the beautiful thing, that we're broken and we're weak and we're super aware of that. In a way, we're almost initially less productive than we would be if we just stayed in the UK. And the Lord is using that, and He's using that to shape us as well. I think there's so much that He uses in that time to make us more into His image and make us better disciples and witnesses in the way that we become more loving and more dependent on Him. And yeah, He's got His hand over all those small things, doesn't He?
Definitely. Yeah. And we do see other aspects of God as we travel into different cultures and have different experiences and go through different hardships. Yeah, very much so. Okay, so you were learning about yourself, you were learning about mission as you were doing some of these short-term trips. Is there one we haven't covered so far?
The one we probably haven't touched on was my very first one to West Africa. That was my first exposure to another culture and overseas mission in general. And the Lord used that to really confirm that desire in me to want to pursue long-term mission. But probably it was the trips afterwards which most narrowed in and taught me a lot about what that actually looks like.
Okay, so continue with how it developed and how you ended up where you are now.
Yeah, coming here, me being here now is very unexpected. I think if you'd asked me 10 months ago, I could not have imagined in any option that I would be here, which is a beautiful way of seeing how clearly the Lord led. But I came off the back of my last short-term trip and went straight from that into one of the Frontiers training weekends, which was a great place to process the trip and some of the disappointments that I had off the back of that and questions I was asking the Lord, and was just thinking that through and not quite sure what the Lord was saying or where He was leading. I was in a place of, I'd just finished a discipleship year after graduating and had been asking the Lord anyway what to do next, and had been kind of praying about whether or not it was the time to start taking the next steps towards going overseas, and had continually sensed the Lord asking me to wait and not commit to anything. And there had been a few different opportunities that had come up for things to do in the UK, which I loved the sound of. But then some of them, I just prayed about it since the Lord asked me to wait. And then one of them, I thought it was what the Lord was asking me to wait for. And then kind of down the line, there was some email correspondence that just went completely radio silent. And the Lord used that as well. He works in many ways. And it was at the end of this training weekend that the opportunity to come where I am now was first brought into conversations. And it was something that everyone that I was with we were talking about it, talking about the family that I'm with now, and just how amazing they are, how anyone who gets the opportunity to serve with them should definitely take it, and it would be a great opportunity. And I was hearing all this and being like, oh, interesting, but wrote it off because of where in the world it is. And I wasn't considering that part of the Muslim world. And then had multiple friends privately get in touch with me and just challenge me to think about it, which was quite unusual to really have such direct and specific encouragement or challenge from people. So I took that advice and encouragement and got in touch with these people and turns out they were in the UK for a sabbatical home assignment and were living half an hour from where my parents lived. And I was with my parents at the time. So I think 2 days after getting in touch with them, I met up with them for coffee and really hit it off and got to know them and what they're doing out here and loved the sound of it. And as conversations continued, sensed the Lord inviting me into this as the next thing to do, which was speeding up the process of going overseas compared to kind of the timeline I had in mind. But became quite sure that, yeah, this is an opportunity the Lord has put in front of me and I want to say yes to that. So I quickly said yes, and then 3 months later hopped on a plane and have been here for the last 6 months, which has been amazing.
So you're in the Eastern Sahara region.
I am, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us what it's like. What was it like to land there? You'd done at least one trip to Africa before, but that was West Africa, and then all these other various short-term trips. But now it's very different. You're coming to live somewhere, you're coming to stay. Yeah, give us some of those first emotions and feelings and things you observed around you.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the first things I noticed was it was actually my journey coming out here. I flew via Istanbul airport and was waiting for my flight. And there was this airport, like the airline steward who was going around checking everyone's passports and visas and everything. And he just couldn't quite get his head around the fact that I was going to the country I was going to. And he probably spent about 5 minutes asking me, like, are you sure? Are you sure this is the right flight? Like, are you sure this is where you're going? Like, why are you going? Have you been before? And I said, no. And he was like, then how? Why are you going? I can't understand. And yeah, I just found that quite amusing to see from like an outside perspective. Oh yeah, it doesn't really make much sense why I'm going to him. But yeah, I found that quite amusing. And then yeah, got on the plane, met some really friendly people, which was a great start. And arrived and it was hot and people everywhere. And I think one of the first things I noticed was actually just like the smell in the air reminded me a lot of when I was in West Africa. And there was just a sense of like, oh, yeah, this brings back a lot of fond memories. And I kind of got a sense of like, just felt at home very quickly and was very warmly welcomed in and very quickly just met a lot of amazing people. So I first arrived in the capital and was there for a week or so. And then we took a 2-day drive to get from the capital to where we've been for the last 6 months. So that was quite the adventure of a 2-day drive with 7 of us and all of our luggage in this car on very interesting road conditions, lots of bumps and turns and, you know, cows walking through the road and people walking through the road selling you things. And you don't quite know where to look. Like everywhere you look, there's something going on and there's people to see. And it was so colourful with everybody in there, like colourful clothes and scarves. And there's a beauty in that that's just so different to UK. It's just really exciting. I remember that trip being very exciting. And then arriving at the small town where we were based. And it was just so remote in a way that is like nowhere else I've kind of called home. Just very beige and just sand and dirt and so few plants and trees. And that was something I was expecting to find hard. I love green and I love nature and plants. And I was aware that that might be something I would find hard coming here. But very quickly, the Lord helped me see the beauty of this place and the hills, and there's beauty in this kind of the wilderness that is part of the world. Those are some initial things that I noticed.
Yeah, tell me more about the living environment there. It's quite a poor region, poor part of the world, but what does it look like as you guys, for foreigners living there?
Yes, yeah, a very poor part of the world. So for us, it means no running water. We have water delivered every few days, which has to be dug out of the kind of dry riverbed. And then we have solar, which allows us to have electricity, but that's very unusual. It means that we would have kind of people coming multiple times every day asking us to charge their phones for them. And that was just a system which went wrong really badly at some point. And about a month or two before we left, we finally were like, oh, maybe we should do some kind of system for knowing which phone belongs to which neighbor, which worked really well. Just a bit late in starting to implement that. But yeah, so that's a part of kind of everyday life. And we had quite a big compound that we were staying in with quite a few buildings, which was very different to our neighbours who would have maybe one or two huts and then mostly just live outside and live in their yard. And we had part of the family I was with, part of them being allowed to live where they lived is that they had to have kind of barbed wire all around their compound walls, which I think when I first arrived just gave quite an interesting perception of, yeah, just it obviously stands out compared to the neighbours of this is a different place. But it was meant for their safety. And yeah, I don't think it was seen negatively by anyone, but I just thought it was quite an interesting thing to observe and to see. But yeah, very off-grid living, I suppose, which we would choose maybe to live more that way in the UK, whereas for them, that was the only way to live. Very, very basic, very simple, very few conveniences. And in the town where we were, there was a market 2 days of the week, but other than that, we couldn't get any fresh food really. So you had to make it work, and very limited options for fruit and vegetables and meat that you could get. So we probably had quite a limited diet of what we ate just to match what was available. And even for us, that was very different to the locals just because it was poor. They would mainly eat just the grain, the millet that they would grow. And that would be every meal using millet in some way and then a pretty basic sauce. So yeah, even compared to that, we lived in luxury, but still a very basic level.
What was the hardest thing for you? Was it the heat? Was it the dust? Was it the food or lack of choice? Or bugs, perhaps?
Yeah, I think maybe the limitedness of food definitely took quite a while to adjust to, just in not only the variety, but just also the quantity of like fruits that's available. And in the UK, it's so easy to, oh, like you want this for dinner, you just go out and buy it. Whereas you have to really think ahead there and make the most of what's available. And oh, there's cabbage in the market, so you can get a cabbage, which is this really exciting thing. But other and yeah, there's like one type of meat that's really tough. So anything you want to do with meat, you have to pressure cook it for ages to make it not super tough and chewy. And yeah, the idea of having like chicken or mincemeat or something like that's just wow, like that's so special. So when we were able to get that in from a city, it was like, oh, what an exciting time. Let's save this for a special occasion. So that was probably one of the harder things. Yeah, the bugs, I arrived at a good season where it was getting a bit cooler. So I didn't have to struggle with heat straight away. And the bugs were like dying down. There are like lizards everywhere, which took me a little bit by surprise. And just getting used to like, oh, what's that sound? Oh, it's just the lizard running around on the roof and causing mayhem. And be careful of the scorpions. And yeah, one day I walked into my bedroom and there was this massive scorpion on my wall. I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh no, what do I do? And I just stood and stared at it until I could get someone to come and help me kill it because I don't want to kill it myself. But thankfully they move very slowly, so it didn't scuttle away or anything. But yeah, just those things that you're not used to in the UK and catch you a bit off guard maybe.
Yeah, interesting. So do you have mosquito nets and things like that?
Yes, yeah. So I actually was advised to bring like a mosquito net tent, which just means that like wherever you are, if you have to, like on our journey to the town, we had to sleep somewhere overnight. And it's helpful just to have like a tent you could pop up and know that you're sleeping safe and sound. And I think even more than the netting, it keeps you enclosed so that bugs can't fall into your bed, which is maybe the thing I would find harder. But yeah, definitely mosquito nets are essential in my first week. It took me a few days to realize that I had about 5 mosquitoes inside my mosquito net. And I was just covered in mosquito bites. And I was like, wow, what's happening? I'm sleeping in a mosquito net. And then I was having a nap one afternoon and just saw them. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I spent about an hour or two like trying to get each one, which I'm glad I did because I slept way better after that. But yeah, it's just things that take you off guard.
Yeah. And in terms of daily life, what are you there to do? Are you there long term? Are you learning language? Is that your main priority at the moment?
No, I'm here on a short-term placement with a family. So I'm living as a part of family life with the main responsibility being to help with some homeschooling, to help with childcare and just the daily running of family life. And then I've done a little bit of part-time language learning on the side. And it's also just an opportunity to really get exposed and get a taste of what long-term life overseas looks like in quite a hard part of the Muslim world to live in. So yeah, that's what day-to-day life looks like mostly is being part of the family and helping out there.
And what about the perspective of the locals towards you? Is it quite odd being stared at everywhere? Obviously, you're living with this family. They've lived there for years, haven't they? So, in a sense, locals are
Yeah.
used to some foreigners coming and going. But personally, how's it been to be a center of attention in some ways everywhere you go?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think in lots of ways, when you go out and about, they just always think that you're one of the other white people there. Like you just get called a name of like a different team member. And I would always get confused with like someone that was there a few years ago, and they would be confused as to why my language is so bad. And then they have to be told, like, oh no, this is a different person. She hasn't got the language yet, which I always found quite funny because like you then look at a picture of the person they thought I was and they just look completely different and you're like, how could you think I was the person? But yeah, it still happens. And yeah, I think on the whole it's been a positive experience. People are very friendly and warm and smiley and they want to come and say hi, and been complimented and been like, oh, it's great that you're here, and been blessed to not have any negative experiences. Being part of that family unit gives me almost quite an easy way to identify there's a word in a local language where I was based of I was a kind of family helper, which they would use for like a sister that would travel in to help care for the kids. And that was the word that they would use to describe me being there. And that was a way that the locals could understand what I was doing there, which I think was almost easier than if I'd shown up as a single kind of living by myself. That would have almost probably been harder for them to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, definitely. Has it been lonely at all, or because you live with the family, there's plenty of kids and adults around, and so it hasn't been too bad?
Yeah, I think it's just been probably an adjustment, mostly because of switching from living with people your age to most of your day being talking with children. It's just quite a different community. And yeah, the language barrier has definitely meant that it's been hard to build relationships with locals. But by God's grace, loneliness hasn't been a big problem. I'm very thankful for technology and the idea that 50 years ago, people that went overseas, it was so much harder for them to stay in touch with family and friends back in the UK or their sending countries. It makes me very grateful for how I can still stay in touch with my family and friends. But yeah, thankfully, loneliness hasn't been a big problem. The Lord's really blessed me.
Yeah, that's great. So even though you're quite remote and you're in quite a poor country, electricity's patchy and water is sort of brought in from time to
Yes.
time. I mean, now you're not in this small town, but you're down in the main city. But even in the small town, there was some kind of internet connection where you could just use WhatsApp and message people, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah, it was patchy and you had to figure out the times of day where it was better. And sometimes it would go maybe a day or two that I just couldn't get any connection. Yeah, I think previously in other years it's been a lot worse. And actually this year it's really improved. So I've probably had a slightly different experience to if I'd been there 5 years ago or even 2 years ago connection, and they could go a month without having a stable internet connection then. But no, recently it's been okay, it's been manageable.
Have you ever thought about your role in God's great mission to draw all people to himself? There are so many ways you could get involved, even if you don't end up overseas. You could share some of these episodes with a friend, introduce Royal Mission to your church, give us a 5-star rating, or write us a review. You could also become a regular partner in this ministry, perhaps by giving £10 or £20 a month, enabling us to keep growing our team here and sending more labourers to the harvest field. You could even join our team in the UK. We're often on the lookout for new staff, for advocates and mobilisers around the country, or for those of you with finance and administration gifts who could work with us here in the office. Do pray about that. Thanks, guys. And now let's rejoin the interview. One thing we haven't talked about so far is just some of your interactions with locals there. How's that been, especially with the language challenges?
Yes. So we've had two ladies especially who come and work as our house helpers. So I interact with them on a almost daily basis. And them along with my language helper, who I would see multiple times a week, are probably the women that I've had the most interactions with. And I've just been really touched, I think, by their patience and their graciousness of, I'm sure they've told me different words for things so many times, and yet still when I give them a very confused blank face, they're just very patient and gently try and help me figure out what it is that we're trying to communicate. So there's definitely a lot of hand signals that have been used for us to get messages across, and definitely some miscommunication as well. I remember even in the last few months, one of our house helpers, she needed some help to carry like a big bowl of water that she'd used to do some washing of dishes. And she wanted me to help her pick it up and put it on her head. And I totally misread the situation and thought she wanted me to put it on my head. So, like, I bent down to help her pick it up and then kind of leant in to put it on my head, and we totally just bashed foreheads. And yeah, it was a funny moment, which was a little bit awkward, but she laughed. And yeah, I think it's just a reminder of how we think one thing, and you just have to laugh off situations like that. And yeah, the people that you get to know best are just very gracious. And I found that with all the locals that I've interacted with, all of our neighbours, and the visits I go on where I just mainly sit there and listen because I can't communicate as much as I'd like to. They're just very gracious and smiley, and they still want to communicate with me. And I'm really grateful for that, and just how they have still taken an interest in me, even when they quickly realise I can't necessarily talk openly about myself with them or ask them questions. Yeah, I've been really blessed by those interactions, and my language helper as well. I was able to go and visit her at her home multiple times, which was great, and meet her family. I definitely had a lot of interactions where I would meet local people, and their first question would be, "Oh, why don't you speak the local language?" And then whoever I'm with from the team will explain that I've only just arrived, or I haven't been here very long and I'm learning a little bit of Arabic, but I'm not learning the local heart language. And then they'll say, "Oh, it's so easy. You could learn it in a day. You should come back tomorrow speaking it." And we always walk away from those interactions with the team members turning to me and being like, "Don't believe them. This language it's taken years and years and years to get anywhere with learning it." But it definitely helped me see that, yeah, even learning Arabic, kind of, it's the heart language that people want to communicate in. And yeah, it was a barrier to relationships, my lack of language, definitely.
And was that frustrating for you? Just all those hours just sitting, waiting, learning, and you can't do so much as when you're in the West, like tick these things off the list, go, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve. And you've lost that for months now.
Yeah, that's so true. And it is frustrating, I think, especially as you spend time with people and you get to see a bit of their heart. And there are so many questions that I want to ask, and so many things I want to learn about them, and I want to build like a deep relationship, and just that inability to do that is frustrating. And also, just when you're on a visit, I feel like I have to be very aware of my facial expression. Like, I can't just zone out, because I want to make sure that I'm smiling, because that's the best way in lots of situations I can communicate that I want to be there and I'm really interested, and I want to show that I really value and appreciate them. And if I don't have language, then I want to be aware of my body language and how I'm interacting with that. But yeah, after an hour or so of language that you don't understand, it's very easy to just zone out and go into my own thoughts. But I often have to just bring myself back in and try and listen intently to try and pick out any words that I recognize, which is the kind of game to play, or try and practice language a little bit in that. But it is frustrating. But it's a reminder that you're playing the long game, like you're in it for the long haul, and trusting that language will come when you're there for the long term, and those relationships can start without the language and then just deepen when language comes.
Yeah, that's good. Very good tips. Have you had to dress pretty conservatively out there?
Yes, yeah, I have. And there's kind of a big scarf or bit of fabric that women just wrap around their whole body, which makes it quite easy because it doesn't matter what you wear, because when you leave, you just always put on the same big scarf. Sometimes it's strange to then be like, "Oh, wow, my hair." Like, I can, when you're in a situation where you don't have to dress conservatively, you realize, oh, it does feel a bit exposing. But generally, yeah, have to dress modestly and just think about that in day-to-day situations.
Has it been hard just adjusting to so much heat all the time?
Yes, heat, and then when it's windy and you've got this big headscarf that's wrapped around and it's flying off and you're trying to readjust it as you're walking. I think I've definitely had many times where I think I look like a complete fool walking down the street trying to figure out how to wrap this fabric
Mm.
around myself. I'm sure I've just given locals a good smile and a good chuckle from time to time.
Yeah. And it's so dry. There's not a lot of greenery there, right?
Yes, yeah, very dry. There's some trees and some shrubs. I'm sad not to be able to see rainy season when everything bursts into life. But no, it's very dry. But recently moving back to the capital, we've spent some time at a retreat center and they've managed to kind of cultivate the ground there so that there's actually grass. And we were there recently and just seeing grass for the first time in like 6 months just was so good. Felt like a real gift from God, especially as someone who studied agriculture, and that's something that I know so much about. And yeah, it does feel like there's been a lack there. So I was joyfully spending time on the grass.
I remember coming back to England and promising myself I'd never complain about rain again because it's such a gift.
Yes.
Anything else as we finished in terms of the culture?
Yeah, I think the personal space and the interruptibility of the culture here is something that I've just had to adjust to, with the idea that when you have visitors, you never turn visitors away. You always welcome them in, you bring them food and water, and you sit with them for a bit, even if you have no language. And yeah, the amount of times that maybe I had an idea of like, oh, I'm going to spend my afternoon doing this. But then there's a knock at the gate and I'm the only adult around for whatever reason, and I have to welcome in these people that I don't necessarily recognize, and I don't know how to communicate with them. I don't know if they're here for a purpose, but then you just have to lay aside whatever you were wanting to do and interact with them and host them, which, yeah, has been something that I think has been challenging at times, just being willing to have that flexibility. But I think it's also a beautiful aspect of the culture that I really love and have fallen in love with, is just that hosting and visiting culture that people just want to spend time at other people's houses, and you don't even have to be there the whole time. You can greet them and sit with them, bring them food and water, and then go off and do what you were doing beforehand, and they'll just happily sit there for a little bit. And I think that's very different to the Western culture of when you host somebody, you have to give them your full attention for their whole visit. So that's been something to adjust to not feel like I need to always be there, but also wanting to not be completely absent. So there's a balance there, which I think I've had to gradually learn and pick up on.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's something we miss being back in the West, actually. Just, yeah, that ease of visiting and people dropping in. And here, everything has to be planned, programmed. Yeah, it's quite an adjustment the other way around coming back.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Any final stories you want to share with us? Funny stories, crazy stories, difficult stories, or if you want maybe some scriptures that have sustained you, or a worship song or something, give us an encouragement to our listeners, maybe who just are thinking, gosh, could I ever do what Lena is doing out there?
Yeah, I think I've learned a lot. I think a lot about the passage in Ecclesiastes, just about seasons and how there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the sun. And there's a season for language learning and not necessarily being able to build relationships as deeply as you wanted to. And there's a season for a more hidden lifestyle of serving a family and not necessarily always doing ministry as you would picture ministry to be, but trusting that there's a time for that and that season will come to an end and the Lord will lead you into a season of fruitfulness. But He's with us in each season, and His timing is perfect for how long each season is, and He meets us there and He provides what we need to carry the load that He's got for us there. And I think I've really seen that be true and seen how the Lord has enabled me to be present and to be able to do what there is to do in this season like this. Just the lifestyle of the last 6 months, being flexible and being able to do whatever the day holds has been so key. And I would not say that's a quality trait that I've always had, but it seems like the Lord has gifted me with that for this season. And I am very grateful for that and would glorify Him for that. So I'd say that's been a key theme. And I've been able to visit some nomadic people groups while I've been here, which has been really interesting, just to get to see that and actually see how their lifestyle is probably so similar to how we see Abraham and the people of the Old Testament when they were wandering. Like, they lived a very nomadic lifestyle. And it's been a real joy and privilege to get to enter into their world and spend some time with them and see how hard life is. And that I think that's really made reading those stories come to life of how Jacob had to go and dig a well. And I've gone with people as they've gone and had to dig for water, and it's so hard. And they have to travel long distances to go and get water, and just reflecting on that and remembering that God wants these people to be his people, just like he wanted Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and their descendants to be his people. And that's been really precious. Yeah, there were some funny moments in there as well. And I've learned that there's a specific way here that a woman is supposed to get onto a donkey to go and fetch water. And me and my friend, we went with a nomadic lady to go get water. And we absolutely failed at getting on the donkey in the right way and just had everybody around us laughing, and they were kind of falling over just laughing at us.
Describe that. What's the correct way to get on a donkey?
Yeah, they kind of come up next to it and they like put their arms behind them and they just very, very gracefully kind of hop up, and their legs are exactly in the right position straight away with these big barrels for the water over the sides of the donkey. And like in the UK, I've done horse riding before, and you get up a horse by like swinging your leg over the side, but that is not an okay way to do it here. And also, I'm slightly shorter, and some of these donkeys are quite tall, and it was, just needing like a leg up or needing to find something to like get on in order to get up. Yeah, it was just good entertainment. I'm glad that I was able to provide some entertainment at my own expense, but I think being able to laugh at yourself a bit is an important trait to have when coming to new places and new cultures.
Yeah, definitely is. Yeah, thank you. That's great. I love that. I can really see that being played out in my imagination. That's really funny. Yeah, and your point about that season of hiddenness, that's really worth thinking about, because there are many seasons in our lives where we're, a little bit hidden or not doing what we think we want to do because of, well, it might be family commitments, caring for an older person, all sorts of reasons why, for my wife being pregnant and looking after young ones, careers put aside. And I think there's something very powerful about that, a season of being a bit hidden, but seeing a beauty in it and seeing what God's up to in that. Also even reminded me, I've been listening to a little bit this season of Lent about the desert fathers and mothers, and of course they stepped out and away into the desert to get away from the busyness and the chaos and the speed of normal life, I suppose, to seek God more. And in a sense, that's what you've done. You've stepped out into a very slow desert life, and you're looking after kids out there. And yeah, it's challenging, but it's in a sense refining and stripping things back from your normal life that makes you think, what is contentment and who am I? And all these important questions. Who is God in the midst of this? And where do I see this in scripture? I love it. That's really helpful. I can't remember, did you say your assignment out there is for a certain length of time? But I know there is a transition coming up where the family themselves are moving.
Yes. So my commitment to being here is a commitment to this family that I'm with. And they're transitioning to a new location, and I'm most likely transitioning with them to their new location. So we're coming to the end of our time here. We've got about 2 months left here in the capital where we are, and then we're going to be transitioning together. So it's been quite a unique season, really, to see this family that have been serving here for over a decade actually packing up their lives and saying goodbyes to all these relationships and leaving, and the emotions that come with that, and them having to really have wisdom in how to leave relationships well and how to navigate selling and getting rid of all the things that they've got in a way that's blessing the community but not causing problems for the other team members. Just lots of things there, and how to engage well in the community and how to steward the resources that they have has been really interesting, and things that you don't have to think about when you're first going to the field, really. You don't think about how would I leave well. So it's been quite an unusual thing to be a part of, but have learned a lot. And so if the Lord ever relocates me while I'm on the field, I've definitely learned some things from getting to be part of their journey in that.
Yeah. And so you have to start all over again in a sense, or at least the community is similar, but you're heading to a neighboring country, you're heading to a large city this time, which will have its own challenges. Will any of the language be similar over there?
Yes, the language will be similar, just a different dialect, but I think the dialect is different enough that even for the family that I'm with, they're going to have to re-enter the language learning season, which will be very different. But yeah, going from probably one of the most or more remote locations of how you could serve in the Muslim world, the complete opposite end of the spectrum, to a really big city is just going to be very, very different, and how ministry looks will be very different, and building relationships and how you meet people. It's going to be a very big transition and change.
Well, we'll be praying here at this end that you'll be finding the next steps for yourself, maybe a team to join long term, whether it's in that region or somewhere else. But it's obviously been a great learning experience for you, and we've learned a lot by listening to you. So thank you so much for being with us, Lena, and God bless you.
Oh, thank you. It's been a joy. Thank you, Matt. Speak soon.
Thanks so much for joining us today, guys. Do get in touch if you want to share how God is speaking to you through the podcast, or if you want to partner with us in raising up more workers for the harvest. You can email me personally, matt@frontiers.org.uk. And here's a challenging quote to end with from Jim Elliot. Father, make of me a crisis man. Bring those I contact to decision. Let me not be a milepost on a single road. Make me a fork, that men may turn one way or another on facing Christ in me. Have a great week, and do join us next time to hear from more ordinary people serving our extraordinary God in some of the toughest parts of the world.